So, y'all, let's get into this Sean Diddy Combs trial. This is day one. If y'all remember, they did start picking the jury and they are ready to go. In fact, they started today, and I've been pulling little snippets from everywhere. But let's get into briefly what went down in that courtroom.
Listening to it all, prosecutors didn't hold back, laying out the government's case against one of the biggest names in entertainment. They say the public knew Sean Combs as Puff Daddy or Diddy, a businessman, larger than life. But prosecutors argued there was a darker side to him, saying he used his trusted inner circle to run a criminal enterprise for decades, painting a picture of a controlling, manipulative, and violent Combs who allegedly forced victims into days-long drug-fueled sexual encounters that prosecutors called freak-offs or wild king nights. The defense argued Combs is a complicated man, but said this is not a complicated case. His lawyer pointing to that disturbing video of Combs dragging and kicking then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, admitting it shows domestic violence, but arguing it is not evidence of sex trafficking. Sitting behind Combs today, his mother and children, all seen arriving at court, supporting Combs as he faces 5 counts, including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. Combs faces a potential life sentence. He has denied all of these allegations. A jury of 8 men and 4 women will decide his fate. We'll break down what we know about each of them. There is a lot to get to after a jam-packed day in court. I want to get right to Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katersky, who was in court for this first official day of the trial. Aaron, opening statements began today. Break down these arguments for us.
They really set the tone for the entire case. You mentioned the kind of Jekyll and Hyde portrayal by prosecutors, someone that the world came to know as Puffy or Puff or Puff Daddy or Diddy or Love, somebody who was larger than life, who was a mogul in multiple industries, and yet who had a darker side. A lot of celebrities have an entourage around them, Eva, but Sean Combs, according to federal prosecutors in their opening statement, operated as a criminal enterprise with trusted insiders whose goal was to coerce women into these drug-fueled sex performances. Some of them, prosecutors said, lasted for days and were referred to by Combs as freak-offs or wild king nights. And the defense sought to downplay these episodes, calling them the consensual threesomes of a celebrity who led a swingers lifestyle. And though they conceded that Combs could be violent with women, even women that he loved and was in a relationship with, they said he's not charged with being violent. He's not charged with domestic violence, with assault even. They said he's charged with sex trafficking in what's depicted on the video in the Los Angeles hotel from 2016. And in other episodes, they say may show Combs being violent, but doesn't show him being a sex trafficker. And they say it wasn't part of any racketeering conspiracy as alleged.
And we saw Sean Combs' family going into court today. Did he interact with them at all?
He did, right from the start. He came into court, Eva, all smiles as his eyes immediately locked on to his family seated in the second row, his sons and daughters, his mom, all there to support him. He blew them kisses in court, made gestures across his heart. But once the opening statements began, Combs was much more dispassionate. At one point, as a man who says he was paid to have sex with Cassie Ventura while Sean Combs sat in the corner masturbating, Combs pushed his chair away from the defense table. His arms went down and he crossed his legs, listening impassively to all of this. At that point, when the male escort was testifying, his daughters left the room.
The first witness, former Intercontinental Hotel security guard Israel Flores, testified about responding to that now infamous incident, speaking with Combs and his ex-girlfriend, a key witness in this case, Cassie Ventura. How did Flores describe that day?
He set the tone by immediately, as the first witness, taking jurors back to 2016. It was March 5th when Flores said he responded to a call from hotel staff of a woman in distress on the 6th floor. He goes up the elevator. He sees Sean Combs sitting in a chair with what he described as a devilish stare, and Cassie Ventura clearly shaken. And he walked the jury through hotel security footage, some of it that the prosecutors played outright, some of it that Flores had captured on his phone, and it shows the detail of what occurred. There is Cassie. She's in blue pants and a hoodie. She's not wearing any socks. She reaches into a bag at the elevator, and as she's putting on her socks, Combs comes barreling around the corner, knocks her down from behind, stomps on her, and the episode continues from there.
And Aaron, I have to ask you, we are seeing these sketches of Diddy in court. He looks very different than how many may remember him appearing. Tell us how he looks.
Well, he's certainly much grayer. We've seen him that way over his last few court appearances, but people who may be, tuning in and seeing him for the first time here at the onset of trial, he's not allowed to color his hair in jail while he's incarcerated, so he's gone gray, both his hair and his beard. He's thinner than we saw him, certainly than when he was first arrested, much less bloated than he appeared at that September date. And he is right now impassive as prosecutors have control, describing what they say he did.
Aaron Katursky for us there. Aaron, thank you so much. Let's dig in deeper on who is in this 12-person jury that could decide the fate of Sean Combs, as well as the legal teams involved in this high-profile case. Here to break it all down for us is ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer, who's worked as a defense attorney here in New York City. You've also closely been following this case. You were in the courtroom today. Let's talk about this jury. 8 men, 4 women. What do we know about them?
So yeah, we actually know a lot. And as you pointed out, 8 men, and these are some of them. We know some of their jobs: massage therapists, retired telephone linemen. But aside from gender and employment, the other thing I want to focus on is age. We have a number of individuals who are over the age of 50. And the reason why I point that out is 2 things. One, it's pretty understandable. This is going to be a case that's going to last for 8 weeks. You got to think about who can take that much time off. The other aspect of that as well is when you're talking about consent, we as defense attorneys seem to see a difference between young people and their understanding of consent and older people. So this may benefit the defense to some degree. And of course, we have the women here as well, 4 of them, and 1 age 74.
Why do you think these jurors were chosen?
So sometimes when it comes to choosing a jury, it's not just choosing who it is on the jury, it's eliminating those you don't want to be on the jury. For the defense, I think they believe that these are individuals that are not just going to be unbiased, but also maybe lean towards their favor. For the government, they believe that based on the answers that these individuals gave, they're going to be able to achieve that conviction. So either side thinks they see someone favorable in this group.
Let's talk about the legal teams here. Let's start with the defense team.
Yeah, so we have some big names that you may know. Mark Agnifilo, you might know him from the XM Defense, where he represents Keith Raniere. Tenny Garagos, the last name may be familiar there as well. Mark Garagos' daughter. Alexandra Shapiro is one of the appellate attorneys. And then here are some names that you might not know, or you may. Brian Steele, a bit of a famous defense attorney in Georgia, made even more famous in his defense of Young Thug. And Xavier Donaldson, a defense attorney who is very well known within the Southern District of New York here, as well as Manhattan, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. Anna, Jason, and Linda all rounding out the team as well and supporting the defense of Sean Combs.
Okay, now we have to talk about the prosecution. This is the Southern District of New York. I mean, they have a crazy high conviction rate. What can you tell us about this team?
So I know about the Southern District of New York, both as a contributor and as a defense attorney. Yes, conviction rate about 90-95%. So we have the interim U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton. He's not actually at the defense table, obviously the prosecution table, but he is the head of the Southern District of New York. And then you have other prosecutors as well. But I want to skip down just real quick because you might recognize the name, Maureen Comey. She's actually one of the lead government prosecutors in this case, the daughter of James Comey. And this is an all-women's team here. I don't think that was an accident, but it seems very powerful when they're arguing the case, when there are so many female alleged victims in this trial.
Yeah, and let's talk about who we heard from today, a male escort, a former security guard. What does this tell you, if anything, about the prosecution's plan here?
2 things. One, they're laying the foundation for someone very important to testify. They want that video in, and they also want the individual who was allegedly forced to have sex with that male escort to be able to testify as to that event, that being Cassie. We believe, or I think it's probably easy to assume, that she'll be testifying, if not first thing tomorrow morning, then at some point in time tomorrow. Now, that could be, in essence, to kind of like a strong, powerful witness. This is, as the prosecutor says, victim number 1, but it also could just be logistics because we know that she is pregnant, very much so, and they might want to just let her get in, out, and get out as quickly as well.
Yeah, also you can't travel too late into your pregnancy, one of those things that we all know about. Today, Cassie Ventura's husband was actually seen leaving the courthouse. Tomorrow, we're expected to see her possibly taking the stand herself. That's pretty early in a case, right?
So it depends on the strategy. I can see why that would be perceived early. This is supposed to be the star witness. Why wouldn't you want to lay the groundwork for more evidence first before you have the major witness? But when it comes to convincing people, convincing a jury, oftentimes recency, meaning getting that information out there first, and frequency, how often you talk about it, is a great way to lock in that information to a jury. And then, of course, just timing. Life for her means that it's just to start sooner rather than later.
Brian Buckmeyer, always helpful. Thank you so much.
My
As
pleasure.
Brian mentioned, the 12 New Yorkers selected for this jury will spend weeks in the courtroom hearing evidence from both sides. And joining me right now is Eric Rudish. He's not part of this trial, but he has spent decades researching juries with attorneys as a jury consultant. Now, we know, Eric, from court records that Diddy's team is using a jury consultant. When you work on a trial like this one, how much do you really know about these jurors?
Well, you try to find out as much as you can, certainly. So based on the 12 jurors, that the information we have, in addition to gender and age, as a jury consultant, we're also looking at their occupation. So are they going to approach this case more from an emotional standpoint or an analytical standpoint? And based on the 12 jurors' occupations, there are several jurors that are good for the prosecution. There's a social worker, there's someone who works at a nonprofit, there's someone who works at a nursing home. But there are also more analytical jurors who are more likely to scrutinize the evidence, such as an investment analyst, a logistic analyst, and even a scientist.
Let's drill down into that a little bit more, since you were talking about their jobs and the jobs that they have. How do attorneys use that information as they make their arguments to play to these ideas that they have about these jurors?
So it's a very emotionally charged case, and the prosecution is certainly going to use that, the emotional element to help, prosecute their case. For the defense, they want jurors to separate the emotional aspect of the case. And you saw it from up front, the one theme is that whatever Sean Combs' actions were, it's separate from the charges that are being brought forth against him. So you want someone who could separate the emotional aspect about this case from the evidence, or how they will approach the charges and whether or not they feel that John Combs is ultimately guilty.
Eric Rudish, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, still ahead, the defense and prosecution gave an overview of their cases today. What does that reveal about possible strategies, and how might they play with the jury? We break down the arguments next.
Okay, guys. So as we just, heard with regards to, these Sean Diddy trial. Now, there has been a lot of information that has been dropped. A lot of information with regards to this so-called sex worker. So a lot of information that's been dropped. So let's kind of get into what else they had to say.
Back now to the case against Sean Combs. ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer is back with us. Also joining us, attorney and legal analyst Ebony K. Williams. Brian, let's start with you because you were in court today. What did you think of the prosecution's opening statements? Do you think it was compelling for a jury?
Oh, very compelling. I think it was good in the sense it was just under an hour, so I don't think people really drifted away. They were able to stay focused, start off with some good themes and also some good examples, talking about a night in which Sean Combs heard allegedly that Cassie was with another man, got an employee up at the middle of the night at gunpoint, and a security guard rushed this person's house, broke in, and laid out how these intricate examples of Sean Combs flying off the handle, as they seemingly described, were parts of this racketeering conspiracy, that he had this inner circle that helped facilitate not only every want and need that he wanted, including these freak-offs, but also how he used them to control individuals around him, marching through each and every one of the elements in this case. It was easy to follow and very compelling.
Ebony, what do you think of the defense's strategy?
Yeah, I think the defense did a lot of the things that they needed to do by way of conceding some obvious points, right? You can't tell this newly sat jury of 12 that you didn't see what you saw on that tape, that horrific, traumatic, violent tape of Sean Combs violently attacking Cassie Ventura. So I think the defense was smart to say, hey, if we were here for domestic violence, we wouldn't be here. He absolutely committed that act. He did some horrible things. He might even be perceived by many of you as a bad person, but it's not against the law to be a bad person. My client is not being charged with domestic violence in this particular matter. Thus, this is a not guilty verdict. That's their argument.
But do you think it's problematic they admitted basically that?
No, I think they had to, Eva. I think, see, preserving credibility is going to be so key for both the prosecution and defense, right? So they had to try to earn some level of truth-telling points, if you will, with this jury. And I think they were able to do that by admitting the very, very obvious things we know so far.
Okay. So Brian, as a defense attorney, obviously they're going to be trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case. Do you think they're going to lean into that?
I think that's the case. As Ebony laid out, you have to admit to some degree to garner credibility. You can't go and look at that video and be like, well, that's AI. That's not really our client doing that. And I think there's a strength in saying he is guilty of some things, but he's not guilty of anything. And I think Tenny Garagos, the defense attorney who did the opening statement, a very well-reasoned, well-argued opening statement, said it's not about whether or not he's a bad person. It's whether or not the government or the prosecution has proven their case. And these are the allegations. These are the charges. These are the elements. And juxtaposing and saying this is domestic violence. This isn't coercion. Going to the heart of what sex trafficking and racketeering is. Saying it's not this. It's this. This is what he's charged with. Not this. Not guilty. I think it was the only argument that can be made.
Okay, the name of the show is called Burden of Proof, Ebony. So what is the burden here?
Yeah, it's a clear and very, very difficult one, actually, if you're the prosecution. They have to prove beyond any reasonable doubt, keyword, there is a reasonable doubt, that Sean Combs is guilty of everything Brian laid out, from the racketeering, the coercion, the sex trafficking, and all of it. And, you know, they're going to have a lot of elements to meet. And again, the more the defense can convince that this is one private citizen's sexual proclivities that may be out of bounds to us, you and I, common man and woman, but this is within his legal right and it's not against the law to have these sexual preferences. The more they can make that, the prosecution is further and further from their burden of proof. But if, as also Brian said, the prosecution could successfully land the plane of connecting dots, right, between sexual assaultive behavior, physically abusive behavior, and individuals, that's going to be key, right? Other individuals working in connection and in collaboration with Sean Combs to execute that under coercive measures, that is how you get to guilty.
Ebony K. Williams, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both so much. Coming up, a music mogul on trial, the cultural impact and public perception as Diddy's trial begins and his former girlfriend prepares to take the stand. It's no surprise there's extreme public interest around the world in the Diddy trial as testimony gets underway. So what are people saying? For that, we turn to Kelly Carter, who covers entertainment and pop culture for us. Kelly, we heard it from prosecutors how Combs created this empire and that the public saw him as a larger-than-life cultural icon. Yet prosecutors say there was this other side to him. He's pleaded not guilty to all the charges. The interest is crazy, though. We've got to talk about the lines outside the federal courthouse this morning. Our Aaron Katursky said it was more than a block long. One guy was in the front of the line trying to scalp his seat for $350. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
I have never heard of such a thing as someone trying to scalp a ticket to go inside of a courtroom. I have seen, and we all have seen, fandom, you know, line up with signs in support of people. I remember covering that 2009 Chris Brown assault case out here in Los Angeles, and I was met with just hundreds of fans who were outside with those fans in support, with signs in support of Chris Brown, but never someone waiting in line trying to pawn off a ticket as if this is Star Wars. You know, this is something we've never seen before.
I'm curious, too, when it comes to Diddy's public image, does the verdict in this trial really matter, or is the damage to his reputation already done?
I think the damage is significant. And quite frankly, I think that the court of public opinion is ultimately going to weigh so heavily, you know, if he is found not guilty of these charges. I don't think that we should all imagine a world where he goes back to business as usual, because I think we know too much. And that's kind of the sentiment, I think, of a lot of people who've been paying attention to today's testimony and who read anything going into today's testimony. We know too much, and people are going to have very strong feelings about the things that they've discovered about him.
Kelly Carter, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true with everything, that's going on. Even if this guy is found not guilty, his reputation is screwed. Like, we gotta pretty much admit that if he does get off, his reputation is screwed. But one other thing, officers testified. Let's get into what those officers had to say, or that officer.
And their first witness in Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial is underway. On the stand is Los Angeles police officer Israel Flores. He was working security at the Intercontinental Hotel back in 2016 when Combs was seen on video assaulting his then girlfriend Cassie Ventura in a hallway in the hotel.
Flores testified he received a call that day saying there was, quote, a woman in distress on the 6th floor. He says he stepped out of the elevator, and that's when he saw Sean Combs and the woman in the elevator lobby. Flores testified he recognized the man in the lobby as Combs, so he's identified Sean Diddy Combs here, and that he found Combs to have a devilish stare. That is the quote that he used to describe that. He then identified Combs in the courtroom. Ariva Martin is with us now. She's an attorney and legal affairs commentator. We're also joined by Lisa Bonner. And I do want to note, Ariva, some other things have happened, which is important here. Flores, now Officer Flores, at the time he was sort of second in command of security at the hotel, but he says that Combs actually approached him in the hotel room with a wad of cash that he interpreted to be a bribe. Flores took it to mean, quote, don't tell nobody, he said on the stand. What do these details tell you as you're learning them?
Well, Brianna, very troubling testimony for the defense. This witness is an excellent witness for the prosecution, laying the foundation for that explosive videotape that the judge has ruled will be admitted into evidence during this trial. We've heard a lot about that videotape, the defense saying that what we've seen so far is not the complete video, and that the video in what they call undoctored form is going to tell a different story. One thing to note, Brianna, the defense, a part of their strategy is to paint this as the domestic violence situation. That yes, Sean Diddy Combs was violent. Yes, he used violence on this video, but that this was all a part of a domestic violence incident involving him and a long-term girlfriend. They're trying to downplay any suggestion that this is sex trafficking, coercion, or violence used to commit sex acts as have been charged in the indictment. But I'm not certain that defense is going to work, because when you look at the totality of the evidence that the prosecution has mounted, it is very disturbing.
Lisa, I want to ask you about some of the other things that have come from Flores' testimony. Notably, he said that as he was escorting Combs and Cassie back to their room, he heard Combs tell her, "You're not going to leave." And that plays into the idea that she was there essentially against her will. But he also, Flores, apparently has told the jury that he asked Cassie multiple times, repeatedly, if she wanted him to call police. And he said that she simply wanted to leave the premises. Apparently, when he did, he says that she left with a black eye, so marks on her face, but refusing to call the police. I wonder what you make of that.
Well, good afternoon, Boris and Brianna. That is a very disturbing statement, and also very common amongst victims of domestic violence. They are often terrified of their abusers and the repercussions that could come after reporting something as serious as her being dragged by her hair. The more violence that you are witnessing, the more repercussions and the repercussions might be. So this is a very disturbing statement, but it also tracks very much with what we have heard from several of the victims and several of the witnesses throughout, that he is a very powerful man, that he is one who believed in retribution. And for her to be involved in a decades-long relationship with her, that proves that she understood and knew that if she did report that, there would be serious repercussions to come, not only from Combs, but also from others in his inner circle. And that goes to the heart of the RICO case, which we are going to see unfold very truthfully, I'm assuming, from Cassie and the federal government's case.
And Lisa, we're just getting all these details from now Officer Israel Flores about what happened after Cassie Ventura left. He said After that, he went back to Combs's room with another guard, so another security guard, to reiterate the hotel policy. He said Combs stepped into the hall, that he closed the hotel room door behind him. And at one point, Combs grabbed the other security guard's phone and accused him of recording the conversation, that Flores pinned Combs to the wall and told him to let go of the phone. As the prosecution and prosecutor Christy Slavic is building this story, Lisa, what is this saying to the jury?
This is again saying that he is a very powerful man with a very bad temper, one who used violence to coerce people into bending to his will. And this tracks with the entire prosecution's narrative, that he was violent towards his victims, that he used abuse, he used false imprisonment. And they have not only the fact of these testimonies, but you're going to see this repeatedly throughout, not only through testimony, but through tapes, through other eyewitness testimony. So I believe that they are trying to establish a pattern of not only abuse, but violence in order to get people to bend to his will.
We got an update a moment ago that Flores apparently sent an incident report at 3 p.m. that day describing the entire interaction with Combs and Cassie from start to finish. I imagine, Ariva, that the prosecution is going to use that to try to corroborate some of the statements that he's making. I do wonder how you think the defense is going to approach some of this testimony.
I think they're going to hone in on Cassie's statements that she did not want to call the police, because a big part of the defense's strategy here is to prove that this was a consensual relationship and that what was on that videotape was merely a dispute, even though it was a violent dispute between two consenting adults over infidelity. We're going to hear a lot about what was on a telephone that Sean Diddy Combs has and that had at the time, and that Cassie Ventura was trying to take the telephone, and that there was a battle of sorts, or a fight of sorts over this phone. They've also made a big deal about talking about how strong these women were, how confident the women were. And all of that is a part of the defense's strategy to say, look, these women had the ability to walk away from this relationship if they felt coerced, if they felt any threat of violence. So the jurors are going to have to really pay attention to what we now know is that so many victims of this kind of conduct don't go to the police, are afraid, as Lisa said, to make reports to the police because fear of retribution and fear of more violence. But I think the defense is really going to try to hone in on Cassie's unwillingness to step forward and make a police report or call the police at the time that she was being assaulted by Combs.
Yeah, it will. That would not be unusual behavior as well for someone who is abused. So we'll see how the prosecution is then going to tackle that, and ultimately what the jury is going to believe here. Ariva Martin, Lisa Bonner, thank you so much to both of you.
In the defense's opening statement, they described Combs as a, quote, complicated man, adding, quote, this case is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money, and that this case is about voluntary adult choices made by capable adults in consensual relationships. Julie Grant joins us now live. She's a court TV anchor and former prosecutor. Julie, thanks so much for being with us. So these opening statements, the prosecution highlighting the issue of power, saying that in the case of Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, only one of them had power, only one of them had control, and that was the defendant, that was Combs. Why is that question of the power dynamic central to their case?
Boris and Brianna, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon to you both. It's key because in domestic violence situations, a lot of people think it's about anger management. Domestic violence is not. It's about power and control. It's about batterers exerting control over their victims through means of violence. And a lot of times through emotional abuse, financial abuse, all sorts of things. And so here, that's largely at the heart of this case for both sides. As we've seen in the opening statements, we're seeing the federal government, as expected, alleging that Sean Diddy Combs had an enterprise and that he was using the whole business enterprise to coerce individuals who would be unwilling to engage in certain sexual behaviors or unwilling to be transported for such. So all of it is coercive and criminal, according to the federal government. But on the flip side, we see the defense team embracing domestic violence here, trying to curry some favor with the jury by acknowledging that Sean Combs is an imperfect person. And yes, what he did to Cassie is indefensible in terms of the battery that occurred. But they're saying that that was it, that it didn't go beyond domestic violence in that relationship, that there was no racketeering, there was no trafficking, there was no transportation of anybody for any illegitimate purpose. So this should be quite a...
Well, y'all, this is getting real crazy with regards to this Diddy trial. Now, we're just reviewing different commentary on this particular trial to kind of get a good feel of what actually occurred. If you guys are familiar with federal court, they do not allow you to record in federal court. So let's kind of get into what we're hearing from various news outlets.
Turn now to our top story of the day, and that is the Diddy trial. After a little bit of a delay this morning, they did get the jury seated, and now we had opening statements just before lunch. So let's go out right outside of the courthouse in New York and get the latest updates from Fox 5 New York's Michelle Ross, now joining us with the latest details on this highly in-demand trial.
That's right. And despite having to choose the jury this morning, things are moving along pretty quickly. A jury of 12 people has been seated with 6 alternates, and that consists of 8 men and 4 women. And opening statements have already concluded before noon Eastern time. The court took a break for lunch, and now they may be very much rolling into their very first witness testimony. Now, as for the prosecution during its opening statements, they told the jurors that they can expect to hear during the course of this trial about 20 years of alleged crimes that Sean Diddy Combs committed and his inner circle who enabled him. Arriving at the courthouse this morning were Diddy's children, his sons and his twin daughters. They left from a black van holding hands. Depending how far witness testimony gets today, they could hear in detail the graphic allegations their father is accused of. The prosecution mentioned kidnapping, arson, drugs, and sex crimes. They also mentioned that Diddy forced ex-girlfriend and R&B singer Cassie Ventura to have sex with male escorts while he watched and filmed and kept the recordings as blackmail. He's also accused of forcing other women to participate in occasions referred to as freak-offs, days-long drug-fueled sex orgies that lasted days. The jury will also see video of these sexual encounters. The defense told jurors it will be hard to watch, but will show that the encounters were consensual. Diddy has denied all allegations, and his publicist spoke outside the courthouse this morning.
This has been, 8 months waiting for this, so I think everyone's just ready to get this ready.
And the defense has said they will admit to domestic violence on Diddy's part, but they will argue that there was mutual violence on both sides. But remember, domestic violence is not a charge in this case, in this trial. He's facing racketeering and also sex trafficking charges, among 3 other charges. Now, witness testimony, they just came back from lunch. Witness testimony could be going on right now as we speak. We're live outside federal court in Lower Manhattan. Michelle Ross, back to you.
All right, Michelle. Yeah, we look forward to those details coming from the first witnesses on the stand. We appreciate all of the updates, of course, right here on Live Now from Fox. And we will be continuing to give you the updates in real time as we get them from inside the court. We do have reporters that will continually be giving us updates. So they are our eyes and ears from inside the court, because obviously it is a federal case, no cameras allowed there. Let's continue on here on Live Now from Fox and continue to talk about the case against Diddy here as the opening statements are wrapped up. We are waiting for that witness to come to the stand, but I want to bring in our next guest to help break down the case against Diddy and maybe a little bit about what the defense plans to do for Diddy in this highly in-demand trial. So let's go out right now, bring in our next guest, a friend here of Live Now from Fox, Ben Taylor, criminal defense attorney. Thanks so much for joining us, Ben. It's been quite some time since we talked, but I'm so glad that you are here with us now. And Ben, so first off, we are seeing really this highly charged, in-demand trial finally get going. And right now, we are waiting for that first witness to be on stand.
witness will take the stand for the prosecution, and the prosecution is going to definitely try to make Sean Combs look very bad throughout this trial, and trying to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because it's a criminal case, whether or not he did, commit this sex trafficking and racketeering. So this is going to be an interesting trial to see the witnesses, what they say. And the defense, during their opening statements, it was interesting to see that they kind of said that a lot of these witnesses were money hungry and wanted to go after Sean Combs for his money. So it's going to be interesting to see at the end of the day whether or not they believe the defense's statement of these witnesses have a motive to lie because of money, or whether or not the prosecution can actually prove that he did do sex trafficking and racketeering.
And tell me, for the defense here, as they are going to have to paint Diddy, and really to talk to the jury, as this is an individual, of course, that has a lot of money, has been in the entertainment business for decades, but has a very different life than the regular person. And how are they going to really paint that picture of Diddy, where he has this different life, but at the end of the day, maybe isn't as bad as what the prosecution is saying?
The defense attorney is trying to do that right now, Mike, in opening statements, trying to say, yes, there might be some bad things about him. Yes, you might see him on video assaulting his girlfriend. However, he didn't do the sex trafficking. He wasn't involved in racketeering. And that's what they're going to try to prove, try to humble him. Trying to make him seem like a regular person. Because yes, a lot of jurors are going to say, this is a rich guy. Is he going to try to just get away with it? He's going to buy his way out of this. Or is he a normal person? Is he actually the victim here? And are people trying to accuse him to try to get his money? So as a defense attorney, you definitely have to make your client look relatable, look presentable, and make him look like a regular person. So that way jurors don't have these preconceived notions or stereotypes, because yes, he is a famous person and he is in the public eye.
And I also want to talk about this, Ben, because we are waiting for Cassie Ventura to be on the stand. That is one of the prosecution's star witnesses, and of course is the one that is in that hotel security footage there. But she is very much pregnant right now. How will this play a role in how the jurors perceive her versus if she wasn't pregnant?
Yes, of course. I mean, jurors definitely have the normal people like you and I, and they have, they're sympathetic to different people's situations. And her being pregnant, they may feel that, she's telling the truth or sympathetic towards her. And that could play a big role because people see that. The jurors will see that. However, if she's, muffling over her words and she's inconsistent, and if she's caught up doing a lie, no matter if she's pregnant or not pregnant, it doesn't matter if she's pregnant or not pregnant. If she's caught lying on the stand, the jurors will definitely punish her for that and favor towards Sean Combs if that happens. So yes, you're right. Pregnancy, the way witnesses look are huge, but we'll see, how she does on the stand, whether or not they believe her or not.
And what are attorneys telling Diddy, giving the advice for when he is just sitting there at the desk there with his defense team? What are the ways that a defendant should look like during a trial? And of course, this one that is going to be so long, about 8 to 9 weeks. So what are some tips that they probably gave Diddy as these opening statements? And then, of course, the trial does really take off?
Yes, as a defense attorney, you always tell your client to remain calm. No matter what good evidence comes out or bad evidence against you, you don't want to seem frustrated. You don't want to seem like you're shocked by something, because the jurors are looking at you at all times. There's at least one juror who will be their eyes will be on Sean Combs at all times. Of course, they're listening to the witnesses, but they're looking at him to see how does he react. Does he react angrily? Does he smile? Does he laugh? I mean, they're judging him because he's on trial. So the nonverbal cues are huge for jurors. Because doing trials, a lot of trials, I've had jurors after the trial, I talk to them and they'll say, yes, I saw your client smile. Or I saw your client look very serious. And that actually helped your client. So the way he presents in court each and every day, the jurors are looking at him and they'll be judging him by the way he looks. when he does.
And Ben, another thing I want to discuss here, because it can't be overlooked, where the prosecution not really coming out of the gate too strong. And I mean, because one of their witnesses, one of their victims that was going to be on the stand, MIA, and definitely that they have been trying to reach, but have not been able to come in contact with that person. Tell me, how does a defense team really try to jump on the fact that they are going to be one witness short here along the way?
Yes, when you lose a witness in the middle of trial, and that's very normal because jurors and even witnesses disappear in the middle of a case. So when that happens, that does stink. But maybe you had to put Sean Combs on the stand. I mean, that's going to be interesting whether or not he's going to testify, because you just have to, improvise, just like in a sports game. If you fumble the ball, you got to pick it up and keep running. So they're going to have to pick up the ball and keep running here. And even if they lost a key witness, they're going to have to try to figure out what can they do to still win the case. At the end of the day, you're trying to win the case. And remember, you need most of the jurors to say guilty for the prosecution to win. So the defense gets one or two jurors that are hung or confused on the evidence. That's a win for the defense if they can't do a conviction.
And Ben, I also want to talk about this aspect. It's being talked about in several media outlets, including the New York Post, talking about Diddy's shocking gray hair and how it's not being dyed his black color there for the trial. Tell me, is this a move by the defense there to maybe bring him along more as maybe is perceived as, hey, he can't be what they're charging him with when he doesn't look maybe that strong?
Yes. So a lot of times what happens is, yes, you have a client put on glasses, you have their client go gray, wear a tie, not wear a tie, depending on. A lot of times in federal prison, they're not allowed to have dye. So that could be a factor here. Maybe the federal prison is not allowing him to dye his hair black. But looking older, looking gray, might make the jurors believe, well, can this old man really do what they're saying? So it could be a defense strategy too. So maybe the defense is glad that his hair is gray, or they could look like he's stressed out. And maybe the jurors were like, this is not the same guy I see on TV. This guy looks a lot different than the guy I see on TV. So maybe he's kind of a weirdo. I mean, a lot can play into it, Mike. So it's just very, you really can't read into the jurors' minds, but you're 100% right. The gray hair could be a positive or a negative, depending on what the jurors think.
Yeah, it's definitely not a look that the public has really been accustomed to, of course, these last 20 years with Diddy, seeing him in music videos and such. Lastly, Ben, because this is going to be such a sexually charged trial, and some of the information that will be coming out is going to be very explicit, tell me, how will that be for jurors when they finally do get the case in about 8 to 9 weeks to discuss this behind closed doors when they're talking about the trial? Will it be hard for some of them to talk about some of the facts here of this case because it is so sexually charged?
Yes, I mean, different sexual traumas could come up in some of the jurors, but during jury selection, the judge and the attorneys try to look into to make sure that there's nobody on the jury who will be traumatized, who will take, these graphic images and talk will affect them. So hopefully they did that. So that way you want a fair trial and you want fair jurors on the case. But no matter what, once you see it, it's shocking. Once you hear these words, it's shocking. So no matter how well you've trained your brain and trained your mind to try to be ready for the evidence, once people and the jurors see the evidence, they can be shocked. So yes, when they go back in the jury room, they hear this graphic testimony, this is definitely going to affect a couple of the jurors back there.
All great info. Thanks so much, Ben. Taylor, so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox, giving us a perspective of what to expect here for these next couple of weeks. And before we go, I do want to mention here that we're taking a live look right now outside of the courthouse, and we are learning that the prosecution has called its first witness. It is a security guard that was in the inner Continental Hotel back in 2016. Of course, this one was the hotel in question there with the security cam footage. And maybe just talk a little bit about the aspect of bringing in your first witness on the stand, the security guard, and how they are trying to maybe set up for the star witness, Cassie, to come onto the stand.
Yes, as a prosecutor, you want to start off strong and you want to wake up the jurors and make sure that you have a strong witness. So right now, the security guard is here to kind of set up the scene of what the security guard saw, what location they were, scanning, and basically what their job was to do. That way, the jurors have information when the star witness comes up and testifies. They already have some background information. So this security guard is going to testify to some background information and to they'll testify to what they saw, and then the star witness says exactly what the security guard says. That's just two people double down on this and make it even a stronger testimony.
All right, Ben Taylor, thanks so much for your updates and insight. We always appreciate it here on Live Now from Fox.
Well, guys, that is pretty much what happened in the Diddy trial. This is day one. As you guys probably already know, they went through a slew of jurors, and they have finally, they have the jury, and today they were just shooting away, with testimony today. Now what they're saying is tomorrow, they're speculating that Cassie will in fact testify. Now, this still is day one. Now, they did have about 4 days of deciding what jury they're going to go with and all of that, but those days were not actually testimony. So this is the first actual day of testimony, and we'll cover it. I don't know, can't really anticipate how long this trial is going to be. I know they were saying a few weeks. I don't know. From what I'm learning is that there is a witness that is missing that allegedly did not show up. So I don't know if maybe potentially they're trying to find this witness, or what is really going on here. But we do know that the trial is in fact moving forward with what they have. We're being told that Cassie will be actually testifying on tomorrow. Now, for those of you who may know, I mean, we all probably saw Cassie at this point. She's very much pregnant and looks like she is pretty much due any day. So maybe they are allowing Cassie to go first, to just get her testimony out of the way, because God forbid, the lady goes into labor during the trial, right? So we don't know, how many months she is, but, perhaps she will get through the trial. I'm not sure. But like I said, we'll talk about it and kind of keep up with what's going on. And generally what I'll do is I'll pull different, media outlets information, and we'll just, bring it here and talk about it. But we'll get into day two tomorrow.